What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So some interesting developments have happened for UFC 307, which I'm sure you guys have already seen already. But former bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling has pulled out of his fight against Movsar Evloev at UFC 307, just under 3 weeks away. And the reason why this is a little bit interesting is because this fight was, by many, thought to be like a number one contender fight for the featherweight division. And Aljamain Sterling, I guess he realizes this, and he told Movsar, he said, you should wait until December, and then we can reschedule this fight. But that doesn't really make sense on the Evloev side because the belt is on their featherweight, like their division's championship fight is going to be in the same month, like 2 or 3 weeks apart. So if Evloev ends up fighting and he has a dominant win over a ranked featherweight, he has a really good shot at making a case to get the next title shot. So in this way, whoever wins out of that title fight in UFC 308, either Holloway or Topuria, they're going to be on similar schedules, and they can schedule to fight maybe early 2025. So it doesn't really make sense for Evloev, and I believe he thinks the same way because he says that he wants to remain on the UFC 307 card because he's been training extremely hard for this fight. Now, there is a few people that could take this fight that I wanted to talk about. Now, everybody's favorite option, I'm sure we all were thinking of it, Diego Lopes. Now, I really wanted to see this go down because even though Diego Lopes just fought at the Sphere at UFC 306, and he's only going to have like 3 weeks of preparation, I know that I had a feeling that he would take this fight because we know that he's wanted to redeem that loss against Evloev in his UFC debut. But seemingly, before I ended up making the video, they're going back and forth on Twitter, and Diego Lopes is no longer interested in that rematch because now he is higher up in the rankings, which makes sense. But I don't know if Diego is expecting to get a title shot, and that's why he doesn't want to fight. In my opinion, if he comes in and fights Evloev and beats him, takes his zero, I genuinely think Lopes is just next up. It just will solidify him as the next featherweight title contender. But it seems like Diego was on Twitter saying the bus has left. I was trying to fight you a little while ago. Basically, he was saying, he's like, but since I started in the UFC, since we fought, he's like, I fought 5 times. I've won every single fight. I'm pretty sure he's won since Evloev. Evloev has only fought Arnold Allen, I believe, since then. And he said you don't finish anybody. So Lopes is definitely not interested. I was personally hoping that he would, but it's going to be interesting to see who ends up filling in. But for right now, let's look at the featherweight rankings. We got the top 15 in front of us, and we're going to go through the entire 15 ranked fighters. So Edson Barbosa, I don't think they give him a fight. He just got dismantled over 25 minutes against Lerone Murphy. Now, first up is, at rank number 14, is Dan Ige. And yes, I know that Dan Ige is scheduled to fight Lerone Murphy at UFC 308 later in the month in October on that Holloway and Topuria card. But we've seen fighters already be scheduled and take a short notice fight earlier from their currently scheduled fight. And somebody like Dan Ige, as we know, when he stepped in on hours' notice to fight Diego Lopes at UFC 303, I believe it was, we know he's a gamer. We know that he's going to take an opportunity like this if it is presented to him. And I honestly would not be surprised if the UFC reaches out and says, listen, Evloev needs a competitor. Nobody's willing to take that fight. Do you want to take it? And I think it does better for his career currently to fight Evloev rather than Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy is only ranked 12th in the division, and Evloev is number 6. So it has all the positives to go and fight Evloev instead, and like it's harmless. If he ends up going up against Lerone Murphy, if he loses, he probably remains around the same. If he loses to Evloev, he probably remains around the same ranking. But if he beats Evloev, that does a lot more for him in terms of the rankings for this featherweight division. So we're going to see if this is I don't think it's UFC's number one, but it is definitely an option. Next is Bryce Mitchell. He just got slept like almost a year ago now, in brutal fashion by Josh Emmett. So I do not think that he is going to be stepping up to fight here. Number 12, Lerone Murphy. Same idea with the Dan Ige fight. He may get offered this fight. He's probably, it's just, I don't know if he's an undefeated fighter. It's going to be a little more shorter notice against a completely different opponent. But he may take this opportunity as well. I just personally think out of those two guys, the UFC would probably reach out to Dan Ige first. Regardless, I'm not sure that Lerone will end up filling in. Now, Giga Chikadze, he just lost to, who did he fight? Arnold Allen at UFC 303, I believe. So I don't think he's 1-2 in his last 3 fights, and the only win that he has in that 3-fight stretch is against Alex Caceres. I don't think he's next up. Calvin Kattar, he's coming off a loss against Aljamain Sterling at UFC 300, and he was actually scheduled to fight Kyle Nelson a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, whenever Steve Garcia fought Kyle Nelson, and he withdrew. Calvin Kattar withdrew from that fight, so I don't know where he is in terms of medical standing, so he's probably not going to take the fight. Aljamain Sterling is the one that pulled out of the fight, so he's number 9. And now that gets us to number 8, Josh Emmett. Now, this is a little bit interesting because, yes, he's 39 years old at this point, but he is coming off of a KO of the year contender against Bryce Mitchell last year. And at 39, if he gets brought this opportunity to step into almost the top 5 and get back into that kind of conversation for the top featherweights, I think it's a perfect opportunity for him. I don't necessarily think it's going to be Josh Emmett, but he is definitely a possibility. Now, after that is Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen is coming off of a win against Giga Chikadze, but he already fought Movsar Evloev. That's actually Evloev's most recent fight, which Evloev ended up winning by a unanimous decision, I believe. So I don't think they're going to give this fight to Arnold Allen. And number 6 ranked is Evloev. He obviously cannot fight himself. Number 5, Brian Ortega. This guy just got absolutely destroyed by Diego Lopes at the Sphere, and there's no way he's going to be medically ready to fight Evloev at UFC 307. And that brings us to number 4, Yair Rodriguez. I don't think this fight happens, but if they're running out of options and they can't fill the slot, Yair is definitely an option. I think it's like the least likely of all of them. Even I think Dan Ige to fight is probably has a higher probability of happening than Yair Rodriguez, to be perfectly honest with you guys, but that's just my opinion. And then, as we know, number 3 is Diego Lopes, but it seems like he is not willing to take Evloev on now at this current stage of both their careers. I'm sure that the UFC could persuade Diego. I'm sure money's always a thing. It's a great bargaining tool. But if UFC comes and says, Diego, listen, Volkanovski's supposed to be next for either the Topuria or Holloway, whoever wins. If you step in against Evloev and beat him, you get the next title shot. If there is title talks for Diego Lopes, if he steps in against Evloev and beats him, I know that's a tall task, but it's definitely possible, especially this version of Diego Lopes. We never know. Stranger things have happened, but all this back and forth could just be like hyping up. I don't know what the case is. Unfortunately, I don't think Lopes is going to be the replacement fighter for Aljamain Sterling anymore because of those Twitter exchanges, but you never know. And then we go up to number 2, Max Holloway. Obviously, Max is not going to be stepping in to fight Evloev because he is fighting for the title against Topuria. And then we have number 1 in the division, Alexander Volkanovski. Now, I personally don't think this happens, but it's an option. It's an option. Volkanovski, we know, is no stranger to stepping in on short notice. He's done it multiple times, and he hasn't fought for a little while. The only thing is, we don't know if there's UFC, if there's things behind closed doors. If the UFC has discussed this with Volkanovski, saying that he is definitely the next title challenger, no matter who ends up winning against between Topuria and Holloway. So now you guys are going to see something pop up on the screen, but we're going to talk about that after. Now, Alexander Volkanovski, I don't think he's going to step in to fight Evloev, but like I said, we're going to throw out the options here. People that aren't scheduled to fight and are it's around the ranking of Evloev because, like I mentioned earlier, I believe this Aljamain Sterling and Evloev had number one contender in like intentions, I guess. It's not the word I'm looking for, but people were talking about that being the number one contendership because of Evloev being undefeated, because of Aljo coming up in weight and winning his fights. So it's just going to be interesting to see who actually steps in. Now, the fighter that I'm going to put right here is somebody that was mentioned on Twitter and would be absolutely insane if he stepped in, and that is Mr. Gene Silva, the fighting nerd for the featherweight division. I don't know how likely this is, but man, people, the way MMA and UFC especially works, it is not necessarily because people deserve these positions. Gene Silva's an absolute savage. I think he deserves all the success and all the opportunities that he can get because he comes in and he scraps and he's an entertaining guy, and that's exactly what we like in the UFC as fans. And if they give Gene Silva this fight, that would be amazing because despite the outcome, the fact that he stepped in on short notice against an undefeated guy that's almost a top 5 featherweight and took that opportunity, I think that would be absolutely amazing. And he could make it happen if he keeps pushing this, keeps going on online, on social media, pushing for this fight. And if the UFC catches wind of it and there's a lot of hype behind it with us MMA fans, I'm sure the UFC is not going to be stupid and be like, no, Gene Silva's not getting it, he's not ranked, or else he does. The UFC doesn't care if there's hype behind it and it's going to help them fill that void for a pay-per-view especially. I think they'll do it. So Gene Silva's there. He's there as a possibility, man. And that would be incredible. I'm a big Gene Silva fan. Now, that's basically all. I want to know what you guys think. Who do you think is going to fill that slot that Aljamain Sterling left against Evloev at UFC 307? Do you think they even find a replacement? Do you think they reschedule this fight for December? Let me know what you guys think down below. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. But for me, this is exactly what I want to see right here. UFC, you got to convince my boy Diego to step in. Evloev versus Lopes 2 for the number one contendership for the featherweight division. I am in for it. I'm here for it. Let's get Evloev a replacement fight regardless, but this is the matchup I want to see. Thank you guys so much for watching another one of my videos. I will see you in the next one.